A desperate young mother posted on Facebook asking for prayers and light and love for her child. She wasn't even asking for answers or hope because they didn't think they had any. Specialists had told them their child was neurologically brainstorming. He was severely underweight. He was struggling. That one post led to a chain of events that is just absolutely amazing, and I can't wait for you to hear this story. Hi, I'm Jenna Quinton, founder of Adjust Your Media, host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate, and this is a beautiful story, but there are a lot of resources in the show notes for you as well, including a link to find a pediatric chiropractor near you. Today on What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate, I have a special doctor, Dr. Jamie Wyskiver. And I'm excited because she has a great perspective and a wealth of knowledge. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, well, I know you have so many stories, but I would love for you to pick one of them and share with us today. What is something that you would love for the world to hear about?
Yeah, you're right. I do have so many stories, and I love sharing stories just so people understand the true power and potential of what their brain and body is connected with. And I know a lot of people have heard the story about Grayson, but to me, that story is just so dear to my heart, and it just shows the extreme power of chiropractic when all things have failed, when people don't have answers. So I'm going to reshare that story because maybe there's somebody else listening to this that hasn't heard it from the platform at DE. So Grayson is this sweet little boy that was referred in to me by my daughter because on Facebook, she kept seeing the mom post asking for prayers and hope and all this because everything seemed lost for her 14-month little boy. And they were labeling him as failure to thrive, told them to take him to hospice despite him not having any cancer diagnosis, despite him not having any genetic disorders, anything like that. And they just said, we don't know. Make him as comfortable as long as you can till his life is over. And my daughter was like, no, I'm pretty sure my mom can help you guys and help this little guy. And so then she forwarded me the information after 2 weeks of having conversations so I could get in and talk to the mom, which I did on Facebook. And then they were finally able to get into the office. And immediately after the first adjustment, he had never slept for more than I think an hour at a time at that point. And he slept through the night for the first time in his life. And he didn't need his rescue medications. He did not need his nighttime pain medications. And so after the first night, they were like, wow, there's something to this. So they brought him back the very next day. We got him checked again, got his brain and body reconnected so it could have a better conversation for function. And once again, he slept through the night, did not need his pain meds. And so this just kept going 4 days in a row. This is how it was. And then they weren't able to get in for 3 days because of the weekend and all this other stuff. And he was good for the first 2 days. But then the third night, his body started to go back to his old patterns. So they got him back in. Well, he was on a feeding tube at this time, only weighed 13 pounds. His 15 specialists that they had seen, including specialists even at Vanderbilt, were labeling it as neurological brainstorming. But once again, go to hospice, we have no idea. So that was probably, I want to say, about 5 months ago now that he's been under care, and he continues to sleep through the nights when he's able to get regular care without his pain medications. He now has his feeding tube out, and he is digesting coconut yogurt, breast milk, starting to digest food. He is close to 20 pounds. He is growing. He is thriving. He is no longer on a failure to thrive list. He even went to a pain psychologist at Vanderbilt, and they said, wow, this seems like it's something that's stuck in his brain and his nervous system as to why he's experiencing pain, because we're not seeing it on a physical aspect now. We're no longer seeing those reasonings. And so they said, no, you're taking him to a chiropractor. You guys are seeing amazing results. Keep doing it. So these are coming from amazing people that have a different perspective. They just don't know chiropractic and they don't know the chiropractic story. And so I'm just thankful that this family was able to give trust in the situation for what they were going through, but also brought him in, and we had the honor to take care of him and give them a new perspective of his life and what their life can be with chiropractic.
Absolutely. And that is so awesome because there's so many things that I want to talk a little bit more about. For one thing, you said for the brain to have a better conversation for function with the body. So what is it that you're finding if someone has never experienced chiropractic care? What is it that you're doing? How are you doing that?
Yeah, basically we go in and we locate, analyze subluxations in the spine. And that's that vertebra on top of another vertebra, putting a kink in that garden hose, not allowing that message to go through. And I also refer to it with a lot of people as a circuit breaker box. Like each spinal level has a certain thing, like our breaker box of our house may have one breaker that goes to appliances, another goes to the master bathroom, And so the difference between our brain and body and an actual circuit breaker box in a house is we have an intelligence. We have an innate born wisdom that when we have a breaker that shuts off, when we have that subluxation, that pinch of that garden hose, that pressure on that nerve, not allowing that message to go through, like the telephone cord, it may leave the brain and say apple, but get to the body and say orange because there's miscommunication. So we have that inborn wisdom that it can say, oh, okay, this kind of went awry. I'm going to supplement it somewhere else. I'm going to compensate some other way. I'm going to create a detour. Whereas in a house, it has no intelligence. So when a breaker switches, it can't compensate. It's not all of a sudden going to pull energy from the master bedroom, if you will. So that's pretty much one of the best ways that I feel like can be logical is a kink in a garden hose and that good old circuit breaker box story.
Yeah. Well, you also said, that after he'd been adjusted and had a pause in care, that his body went back to old patterns. I think so often people think of it as an immediate, like when you take medication and within, 30 minutes, an hour, you have an effect. And people think of it that way. But explain a little bit, why would a child in this kind of crisis care especially need constant checkups? And what do you mean when you're saying he's going back to old patterns?
So you need that constant checkup and reconnection because it's easier to get disconnected. It's almost like a fuse that isn't doing what it needs to do and keeps short circuiting. So you just need to keep going back in and reinforcing what that positive message is, what that correct alignment is, what the good pattern should be. Whereas they'll revert back because they still have that stored stress and trauma, and it doesn't necessarily always store in the body as much as it stores in the brain. The brain controls every cell, gland, muscle, patch of skin, organ, everything like that in our system. So if the brain is telling the stomach, hey, produce an X amount of stomach acid and it's too much for the stomach, and then we have ulcers as a result, sometimes it may do good when we flip that switch and the good pattern goes in, but we're still stressed about our finances. We're still worried about what we need to do to cook dinner. We're still, trying to make sure we make goals and reach what we need to in our job or our daily life. So we still have stressors in there, which that's why I really love adjusting animals because they don't worry about budgets. They don't worry about cooking dinner, so you can really get in there with an animal and they can hold an adjustment much longer than an adult because they don't have those repetitive patterns in their head. And some babies not in crisis care, and children are very much like that as well. Also, they're not biased in what's happening. So you get the most pure results. You don't have a placebo effect when they could care less on what's happening and they have no idea what's even happening. So I think there's so much proof in the pudding there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, too, the phrase that you said, neuro-brainstorming. Like that would be how his state would be described by his specialists and things. So was there conversations or just for the curious minds that say, okay, what happened to this child? What would put him in a state of neuro-brainstorming?
Yeah, in him specific, his mom had a very rough pregnancy. She had gone through bouts of infertility and just a lot of menstrual issues prior to his conception. And then he had a challenging birth. And a lot of times birth trauma, birth stress, sometimes we don't always view it as traumatic unless, it's a torn brachial plexus and they have shoulder dystocia, we don't think about it as trauma. And I don't like to put trauma in someone's mind either. I like to think of it as just stored things. So I'll tell people at each adjustment, my goal is to get into your brain, take the files that your brain wants to shred or pages from that files, and we're going to shred those. So the neurological brainstorming, everything, the word subluxation means a condition of less light. So it is that bone on top of bone putting pressure on that nerve, but that pressure of that nerve is what is not allowing that life force to go through. But we also have cells that communicate based on flashes, cellular flashes. So some things happen by direct neuronal pathways, other things happen by cellular flashes. So to me, when we have that neurological brainstorming, it's kind of like an airport where you have that light flashing, but you have a cloudy day. You have fog. So it's dimmed down and you can't see that brilliance, that brightness that can help guide your way. So in that neurological brainstorming, it's just like if you have a jar of milk and you shine a light through that versus a jar of water and you shine a light through that, when it's water, it goes crystal clear through. That's the same for brain fog. When our cerebral spinal fluid is really cloudy and isn't flushing through our system and replenishing the way it needs to, we will have minor versions of neurological brainstorming, but we call it brain fog.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was just reading that quote again yesterday by Dr. Roger Sperry, who got a Nobel Prize, who is saying how much nourishment of the brain comes from movement of the spine, of that CSF. And one of my favorite things to say after I get an adjustment is just, it feels like the windows of my brain have been washed.
Yep.
Even where it's like, I have peripheral vision.
Yeah.
And not in a hypervigilant way. It just feels like I can see again.
Yeah. The world's open. There's so many times I'll adjust somebody and that's exactly what they'll say is, oh, I can see clearer. I can hear better. I mean, and the first adjustment, as you and I know, was restoring someone's hearing who was deaf for 17 years. 3 days later, his hearing came back. That's how chiropractic was founded. So, in our senses, considering we have those 12 cranial nerves that control sight, smell, hearing, tongue movement, facial expression, facial touch, all of that, as well as vagus nerve, it's just tremendous what can be accomplished because that's just the 12 cranial nerves. And then on my intake with people, when I explain chiropractic, I'm like, now let's get to the 40 million nerve fibers that exit from the brainstem area. Because we just talked about the 12 cranial nerves and we see how important that is. Now there's even more deeper, parts of that neurology in there.
Yeah. I liked to, you mentioned stress preconception, and I think that this is something that as women, I want to share with younger women, with all the little sisters and the daughters of saying, yes, we all know, take good care of yourself during pregnancy, take the good supplements, move, do the things at whatever level of health we are at that point. But really this point of stress is affecting our babies even before conception.
Correct.
In moms and dads. I was looking at a study about how oxidative stress impacts sperm health and sperm quality so much. Just to say this is really then just the trickle down effect. I also love that you said a challenging birth. I also want to be careful with saying birth trauma, even when I look at my own births and what I tell my children, my daughter's birth, to say, that was challenging. And as a woman herself, for her to know at some point some things, but to say challenging, but even starting with that foundation, a neurological foundation, which is obviously why you love to see babies and kids, I would say.
Yeah, it's so important because like you said, preconception is really key. And I've always known that prior to becoming a certified pediatric chiropractor through the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. But through that education and obtaining that certification that I did, they really talked a lot. One of the classes was epigenetics, but we talk about preconception and how 120 days prior to conception, there is a protocol that you can utilize called the Schaefer protocol that helps clean up the body, do what it needs to do to get the brain and body ready for that most ideal formation of that conception. And it's amazing the results that she's seeing. These babies are born like genetically clear, neurologically clear, birth stress challenges, traumas are being reduced. People that were not able to conceive, have tried even in vitro, are now able to do so. And it is just so powerful that these people are getting their power back, knowing that they can conceive and knowing how brilliant and amazing this process is. But then the thing that's most important to me is that now they can start to trust. They can start to trust that their baby, when it's born, if they could have those challenges occur and then still conceive after those challenges, they're able to start trusting the process of what's happening inside of that mama's body as that baby's being formed and how that brain and body connection to that baby always knows best. And if there's a sign or symptom that comes up, it's not to be feared. It can be your friend. It's telling you information on what you need to do to better take care of yourself, to alter something in your care, or just whatever it is. Or if there is a flag that you need to pay attention to, you can do so. Just like my daughter, 22 weeks preterm labor, starting to leak amniotic fluid. What did she do? Say, you know what, Mom, I don't want to get my cervix sewn. I don't want to take medication to do so because I still want to do a beautiful home natural birth. And so I increased her frequency of chiropractic care. And sometimes I would adjust her 10 times a day in the beginning when all this stuff was starting. But within 10 to 15 minutes of getting an adjustment, the symptoms would go away. And I wasn't adjusting her for the symptoms. I was just adjusting her to get her brain and body reconnected so it could work the way that I knew nature could work. And it worked. She didn't have to go and do that. She was walking 2 miles at 39 weeks pregnancy. She was only on bed rest for 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, it was amazing. So a lot of it's just reconnecting, getting rid of that old pattern. And birth challenges, like you just said, they can be challenging, but I feel labels are so important. And if we label something as traumatic, then we're automatically feeling it's this huge hurdle we have to overcome, this boulder in our backpack that we need to take with us for the rest of the life, something that will never go away. And we do have some things like that in our life that can happen preconception and past. One thing that I thought was really interesting just this week, I had a mom share with me that she believes her baby is having extreme acid reflux with blood because she took acid reflux medication towards the end of her pregnancy. And in her spirit, she feels like it imprinted in her body to create that stress in her baby. And they've linked it to like a cow allergen and stuff like that too, and formula, and if she has cow milk and breast milk as well. But I think it's really brilliant that she's even thinking on that level, because imprints are huge. And it doesn't always have to be something like that. You know, some people may argue, no, they have nothing to do with each other. But, you know, energy is energy. And as you know, I'm more energetic based, and it's amazing the things that we can store in there. So for her, I just, she actually wasn't one of my participants, but I just kept encouraging her to go to her chiropractor more and more and help get that baby reconnected. And I'm pretty sure that baby's brain and body will figure out what it needs to do, but also to pay attention. Don't just all of a sudden be giving it, cow's milk and not paying attention to those things. Those are important as well.
Yeah, because I love words, I'm always looking at like the specificity of a word choice and awareness, being aware, hey, some dysfunction happened. But then is that our focus, or is our focus wellness, wholeness, light?
Regaining function.
Yes. And I think, yes, specifically, there can be so much shame and heaviness. And I just saw now I can't think of it, but the chart that shows the energy of emotions and showing that shame is the very lowest vibration and the very lowest frequency. And so to say, hey, we're not going to put shame on you should have done this, you could have done this, if you would have, there's none of that. There's just the awareness and then the focus on, like you said, the innate intelligence of the body that's encoded into its cells that knows what to do.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I even had a mama recently that found out very, very early that she was pregnant. She was only 2 weeks pregnant, and she ended up miscarrying. And she's someone who just recently started care. We're working through some preconception stuff with her anyway, and have been. But I let her know, I said, don't think that you're infertile because of this. I said, a lot of times back in the day, we didn't have pregnancy tests that told us when we were pregnant that early, and it would be a late cycle or a missed period. Now that we have this availability, we think of it as, yes, it is a miscarriage. She was pregnant. Her HCG hormones, they did start to go up, but it wasn't a viable pregnancy that would have been safe for her body or that baby. But now because we have a label, it can be sad. It can be all of these things. So I said, you need to really just, if you can, shake that off and know your body is perfectly capable of this. You're young, you're brilliant, you're vibrant, you've been receiving care. She was having all kinds of digestive things to where she would throw up every single day when she first started chiropractic care. And she doesn't anymore. She doesn't have the headaches and migraines she did. She's getting off all of her medications just because her body's healing in time. And, obviously she's coordinating with her pharmacist and doctor about that stuff. That's not my role. But it's just tremendous that you can see this. So I'm just encouraging her, like, yes, you can think of it in the way that it happened, but don't be so weighty on it. Don't allow it to become a trauma, because you still have brilliant things coming ahead.
Yes, yes. Now, you mentioned your advanced certifications with the ICPA, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I think sometimes, we're looking for somebody who's close to us and it's convenient, or just, oh, I saw, a reduced first visit, so I'll go there. What is the importance of those advanced certifications and finding a chiropractor like you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I, in all honesty, practiced for 14, 15 years without my certification because I was busy with mom life and, all kinds of stuff, moving from Spain and what have you. And so I finally was able to do it. And I had been a pediatric pregnancy-based focused chiropractor since day one of opening my office. And when I did that, you take 200 hours through the ICPA. So that's a lot of time. It took me about 2 years, a little bit maybe longer, to do this certification series on top of staying in my normal practice, doing my normal thing with my family. But the education and the information and the chiropractor that I became from that 200 hours was night and day compared to what I could offer people. And what I thought was even more brilliant was it didn't just apply to how I practice with pregnancy and pediatric, I was able to duplicate a lot of that information with my adults, with my grandmas, with, people of all various ages. And the work has been tremendous because I learned to be more of a neurological focused chiropractor through that, understanding when I'm adjusting in the sympathetic versus parasympathetic, and how sometimes we don't want to cross those two over because then we're making the brain run two different computer programs at the same time post adjustment. So it's very tremendous that, I've adjusted animals, but I'm not animal certified. So if I go and get my animal certification, I know I'm going to learn vast amounts. And even though I've helped several birds, I just had a crow come in 3 times this week that couldn't put its foot down and now it's standing on both feet, and the trauma that poor bird went through, couldn't even fly, but the parents tried to pluck all the feathers out because it was a crow that had white in the feathers. So it was more of like an attack from his brothers, sisters, and parents. Poor guy, that's a little traumatic, but he's doing amazing. So, but if I went to go and get my certification, I would be so much better. And so even though I have my CACCP and I did that 200 hours, well, I'm still going to the next level. I'm going to get my diplomate is my goal, provided that I pass and all of that. So I have 2 years to start working towards my diplomate, which is an even higher degree. There's about, I think, 1 in 12 to 1300 CACCPs in the world. And there's about 1 to 85, I think now is where the ICPA is, of diplomates in the world. So it's just, really, do you want to go to someone who's more educated and well experienced in this? And I teach continuing education to other chiropractors. And one of the main classes that I teach is force application. And it's based on Dr. Larry Webster, the founder of Webster Techniques, saying we can't just take what we do for adults and make it smaller for kids. And often, even though chiropractic is so extremely safe for children, we don't have adverse reactions like that. We don't have to take adjustments back or recall them. It's beautiful. But even in that, even for myself, I was putting in a little bit too much force compared to what I need to when I took these 200 hours and learned a little bit different. So for me, I just always want to keep stepping up. I always want to be a better chiropractor for myself, for my community, for the profession of chiropractic. I adjust athletes, but if somebody really needs more detailed athletic work, I'm going to send them to a sports athletic chiropractic in my area because it's more about them getting the care that they need than me feeling like I'm a one thing fits all type of mold.
Yeah, I love that. And, as moms, I think about my youngest is 7 now, which is crazy. But I think about that moment when he's just that perfect little newborn and who would you hand this perfect little baby to that has touched no one but yourself? And, what a beautiful thing. I still think about the moment my chiropractic friend putting him up on her shoulder and she's just talking to me and she's just playing with him. And I was like, but I would really love for you to check him. And she's like, I did. It's all good. He's all good. He's so perfect. And just that level of peace and knowledge, knowing that this little baby is taken care of by somebody who has that much love and intention to spend 200 hours, to spend 5 years, to spend decades.
Yeah.
Because you've now decades of learning into that. It is such a beautiful thing. And I think that even as our kids grow, I had a friend who's like, my son does martial arts. He's active, but he seems so tense and his body just aches. And she's like, I don't know if this is physical therapy that he needs or what. And just for more parents to understand, and I said, and this is probably not the specific best way to say it, but I said, tension doesn't necessarily start in the body. It starts in the nervous system. His nervous system is likely tense.
Exactly.
And it's reflected into his muscles. So even though he's a strong, healthy, athletic, coordinated kid, for whatever reason, he's all tense.
Yep. Yeah. And one of my favorite things to do is when a parent will hand me their newborn baby, which is the biggest honor to have them trust you to do that, But what I love is I'll go in there and like you said, it's like just gentleness. Like you'll never hear a joint fart out of a baby or a kid in my practice. That is not what you do. But when I hand that baby back, that baby doesn't have that tenseness, like just kind of in that fetal position, still wanting to protect itself. Often if I lay them on my little kid table and get them adjusted, I will be able to tell them based on the patterns I'm feeling start to release, okay, he's probably going to stretch out his left leg in a few seconds. And then they do. And then I'm like, I feel the right one's about to stretch too. Or if I have them in my lap face down and I'm doing Logan and I'm on that ligament, I'm like, okay, they're probably going to pick their head straight up, turn to the left, and then flop down kind of like a giraffe that you push that button and then they collapse. I said, that's probably what's going to happen. And then when they see it, talk about a family being able to put trust in you when you can tell them what you think is going to happen in that child's body right before it does. But when you hand it back to them, they're like loose little noodles. They're so limp and they're so open and they're so trusting, and their system is just ready to experience and express life versus still being in that protective mode that they were in utero and after birth. Because even the most gentle, honoring, and perfect birth still is a marathon for that mother and that baby. So that's just the best thing to do. And when they can feel that baby opened up, there's no greater thing, in my opinion. It's so cool.
Yeah. And I think that as a society, sometimes we have that the other way. I remember a round of what is protective and what is actually open. I remember the first time it was Dr. Megan told me, well, extension is relaxed. And I was like, when I lay down to take a nap, I don't extend. I curl up. Like, that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And we think about, sometimes we have it all mixed up, but we think about a baby all, snug and curled up. But, what you're saying is a baby like a blossom, like all opened up and blooming. Because if you're all open like this, you're trusting. You're not afraid that something's going to come and attack you.
Exactly.
There's no toddler going to come jump on your bed if you're sleeping like this. I mean, they will.
No. Flexion protection. Yeah.
They will.
Yeah, right. Yeah, flexion protection is key. And, that's it. They're experiencing safety. They're experiencing home inside of their body, which is more of a ventral vagal response when you look at vagus nerve cranial number 10, whereas dorsal vagal is more freeze. It's like we can have fight or flight, freeze, or home and safety. And often many of us, even babies and kids, are functioning in freeze mode or fight or flight, but we're still getting through life, but we're so frozen in other ways. And we wonder why we didn't accomplish all those things that seem so simple and we could. It's because we're functioning in freeze mode or we're functioning in fight or flight. And I was part of that myself, even though I've been in chiropractic for over 20 years. I've started school back in 2002. And I've been in practice almost 20. But after a severe trauma of me losing my second daughter, I was functioning in freeze mode. I was still getting adjusted. But when I really understood this, I was like, I need to change some things up because I know my brain and body is capable and deserves better than this. So I started driving to Nashville, an hour and a half away from me, to get seen by someone who is more upper cervical specific that utilizes tonal work. So even me knows that, well, this person has this different level of education than I do. So I need to obtain that because they are the guru or specialist at that. So I love going to see Dr. Andy Bird on Thursdays, and then I'm blessed and I get to adjust him at the end of it. And so we both leave floating and feeling amazing. So it's just wonderful. And it's changed my life, doing this differently and something that I knew, because I would still get my tonal work, like no crunchy style of adjustment, a kind of combination of kind of network BGI toughness is what one chiropractor locally does with me. But that's I'm on the table for 45 minutes to an hour. And then I would get adjusted by my buddies when I would see them at a seminar that I was speaking at, taking continuing education, teaching, or whatever. I would get adjusted whenever I could. That was not cutting it. Even though all of my friends are amazing chiropractors and they focus on subluxation, my body needed something more routine. It needed more specific work. And so it's I had to, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So I did.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, I know that we could keep talking for a long time. I love everything that you shared, and I think it's so helpful for families to know and then to experience. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes where they can find an ICPA certified doctor near them. And I just thank you for sharing this story. And we look forward to hearing the continuing story of Grayson and how his life just continues to blossom.
Yes, I'm excited to share at each DE and whenever I can. So I'll be sure to keep everybody posted.